To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
Hello my dear grade 9 students. So in the earlier chapter we discussed about the several things regarding the growth substances of a plant. Now this lesson is also regarding some details about plants. But here we'll be discussing about mainly the movements in a plant. And also now in the earlier chapter we discussed only about the growth substances related to a plant. No. But within this lesson part we'll be discussing about the movements of the plants and as well as the movements of different animals. So we'll be focusing within this 8th lesson about the support and the movements of organisms. So you know that the organisms can be divided into 3 categories as plants, animals and microorganisms. So even though we discussed within the 7th lesson, even though we discussed only about the plant growth substances, but however we'll be discussing the movements related to each and every organism who is in our biosphere. So within this lesson part, my dear children, we'll be discussing about the movements of plants, movements of animals and as well as movements of microorganisms, right? So we'll be discussing all of these 3 within this lesson part. Okay. So when we are discussing about the movements, so let me give you a brief idea about a movement. A movement is any kind of a motion that can be observed within the body of an organism, right? We can briefly describe it as like that. Any kind of a motion, right? Any kind of a motion that occurs within the body of an organism. It can be an animal or else a plant or else a microorganism. No matter the type of organism, a small bit of a motion that occurs within the body of an organism can be referred as a movement, right? So sometimes if you take some organisms like animals, sometimes they use or they show somewhat different kinds of motions. Actually here different means they can move from one certain location to another location, right? They can move from one certain location to another certain location. So this is referred as the locomotion, right? So animals, they usually show locomotion. If you take a plant usually showing movements. I mean that they can't locomote. They can't locomote. Plants will not be able to travel here and there. But however, for certain growth substances and for certain other stimuli, okay, I'll explain what do you mean by the stimuli when we are going further with the lesson part. Just for now, let's imagine that certain changes in the environment. We'll ignore about the stimuli, okay. When we are discussing further things related to the lesson, we'll be discussing about the stimuli. So we'll forget it just for now. So a change in the environment, let's take as a change in the environment. If a certain change is going to occur within the environment, sometimes what will happen? Sometimes the plants, okay, sometimes the plants will give certain types of movements. For an example, early in the morning when the sun is going to rise up and when sunlight is going to fall on certain plants, flowers is coming out or flowers are blooming. So that's a particular that can be taken as a particular movement. You know that there's a flower called the sunflower. and sunflower is always turning towards the sunlight. Okay, it's turning towards the sunlight. So these things are movements that can be observed within plants. You know that when we touch a mimosa plant, it's going, or leaves of the plant will show sleeping movement, or it's going to sleeping movement. We can observe that the leaves are getting shrinked. And sometimes in the evening, the leaves of the tamarind plant is going to shrink. Right? So like that, there are different kinds of movements that we can observe within the plants. But however, you know that, my dear children, plants can't locomote. Right? The place of the plant is not going to change. Location of the plant is not going to change. But however, for certain changes that happens in the environment, these plants can show different kinds of movements. So these movements will be discussed in detail within this lesson part. Okay. And also you know that if you take the animals can locomote. So if you take humans locomote by using their legs. And humans can show different movements within their arms, right? So you can see that when I'm folding hand here and there, right? You can see that there is a certain movement. So for this movement, our bones within the skeletal system and also muscles within our muscular system is going to help, right? And as well as when you take other animals like dogs, cats, a lion, all of these animals, they show different movements. They also show different movements and they can do locomotion. For these movements and for the locomotion in animals, muscles and bones are very helpful. Muscles and bones are very helpful. Then about the microorganisms. So, about the microorganisms, my dear children, we'll be discussing about the microorganisms when you go further with the lesson. But however, we have observed microorganisms in our grade 6 and also in our grade 7 years. So within these years, when observing about the microorganisms, I think you have seen that these microorganisms can also move here and there within the medium that they are living in. If you take amoeba, paramecium, euglena, chlamydomonas, these are some kinds of microorganisms that we can observe, right? So these organisms also show different kinds of movements. Okay, different kinds of movements. Even the microorganisms that I have mentioned earlier, they can locomote, right? They show locomotion, right? I mean, like they can move from one certain place to another. So we'll be discussing about the motions or about the movements that can be observed within the microorganisms as well. So we'll be covering all the movements related to the plants, animals and microorganisms within this lesson part, my dear children. Right? So stay with me till the end of the lesson to get the knowledge about these movements regarding the organisms. Right then. So this is a simple brief about the things that we are going to discuss within the lesson part. So first of all, we'll be discussing about the movements related to the plants, animals, plants. Then first of all, we'll be discussing about the movements related to the animals. Then after, we'll be discussing about the movements related to the plants. Okay, right. So let's see what are the things that we are going to learn within this lesson part then. So first of all, like I said, we'll be discussing about the support and the movements of animals first. Support and the movements that can be observed within the animals. That's the first and foremost thing that we are going to discuss. So within animals, my dear children, we'll be discussing about the microorganisms as well. Okay. Within the animals, we'll be discussing about the movements related to a microorganism as well. Okay. Then after that, we'll be discussing about bones, muscles and joints. So these are the ones which are helpful for the motion or for the movements that occurs within the animals. And also, especially we'll be discussing about what are the things or what kind of movements that can be observed within human. So especially we are focusing about the movements that occur within our hand or in our hand. Okay. So within the hand also there are two joints, right? There are actually several joints, but mainly there are two joints. So within those two joints we'll be mainly focusing about the elbow joint. Okay, the elbow joint, right? So we'll be mainly focusing about elbow joint within this lesson part or the second lesson part. Then after that we'll be discussing about support and movements of plants. Support and movement of plants. So within the support and the movement of plants, we'll be discussing how a plant is going to grow rigid, like the way they used to be. And we'll be discussing about several other plants which are not growing that much to that much height, but however, how they are going to keep their rigidity. Okay, what are the chemicals and other substances which are helpful in keeping these plants rigid? So we'll be discussing about these things, about the support. Then after that we'll be discussing about the movements related to a plant. So like I said when I was starting the lesson part, we'll be mainly focusing about the movements that occurs within the plants, like the blooming of flowers, the sleeping movement in different plants when touched, or during dark, when dark is going to fall. Then after that we'll be discussing about the movements, the growth movements. Okay, so like that we'll be discussing about several things. So you know that, for an example, for the growth movement, you know that in the earlier lesson also we discussed that due to action of the auxins, special plant growth substance, always the apex of the plant is growing towards the light. Even though we change the position, no matter we are going to keep the plant right in the dark place, right, always it tends to find out light. Even though the plant is in the dark place, the apex is moving towards the light. So we discuss all those things within the last lesson, right? In the last lesson we discussed those things. So my dear children, we'll be mainly focusing about those types of movements within the plant as well. So these types of movements are mainly related with the growth substances. Okay, so we'll be discussing about those kinds of movements which are regulated or which are being triggered because of the growth substances as well. Okay, so like that we'll be discussing several things, several movements regarding the organisms within this lesson part. Okay, right then, so these are the key areas that we are going to discuss within the lesson part of the support and the movements. Okay, so now let's head on to see the first and foremost topic of the lesson. So as you are given, the first and foremost topic of the lesson is the support and movement of animals. The support and the movement of animals. Right then. So living organisms change the location of their whole body or a part of its body as a response to a stimulus. Now I told you the special term stimulus, right? The plural form of this thing is referred as stimuli. Stimulus and stimuli. Stimuli means the plural form. Stimulus is the singular form. What do you mean by a stimulus? What do you mean by a stimulus? A stimulus is a simple thing, my dear children. In very simple, we can say that stimulus means a change that occurs within the environment. A change that occurs within the environment. Okay, let's consider about the animals, or let's concentrate only about the animals. Within animals, now let's take a human, right? Let's take us for a simple example. So we now let's imagine that now you are moving on a straight road, okay, and a thorn is going to pick on your leg. What will happen? Will you be able to move, or will you be able to able to walk like in the previous? Oh, when you are now you were walking around the you are walking along the road? No. Now in the earlier case, you walk down the road without any trouble or without any pain. But however, now when a thorn is being picked on your leg, it's difficult to move, right? And you will be giving out a certain response regarding that particular incident. Now when you are moving like this, if a thorn is going to pick you, once definitely your leg, you're going to grab your leg and you are going to remove it. So that particular incident can be taken as a stimulus. Okay, picking a thorn in our leg is the stimulus. So a simple stimulus means any change that occurs within our environment, any change that occurs within the environment, the outer environment. Let's take another example. Now when you are looking outside the window, suddenly a lightning strike will come. So what will you do? Definitely you will cover your ears like this. Sometimes you may run. So the stimulus is the lightning. The response which you have given for that particular stimulus is closing your ears or running. For doing that kind of a response, what are the things which are important? Your muscles and your skeletal system is very important in order to run or in order to show different movements. So my dear children, when organisms are responding to a certain stimulus, a change in the environment, right? When you go further with the, when you go to your next grade, you will be identifying about these stimulus very well. We'll be discussing about these things within our next or in our grade 10 syllabus, right? About the responding thing and the coordination, irritability, and there are several things. Okay, but up to now, let me explain a simple thing about that responding and the stimulus. So already I have given you a certain idea, but let me clarify this thing somewhat further. Normally we capture these stimuli, right? Normally we capture these stimuli by using our sensory organs. Now let's go to that previous incident where the lightning strike is going to come. When the lightning is going to hit on a particular place, that sense or that stimuli is getting captured from your eyes. Then eyes sending those signals to your brain. Then your brain is the one which is giving commands for the particular muscles and the joints and the skeletons in order to show different kinds of movements. In the same way, organisms who are living within our biosphere capturing different kinds of stimuli, changes in the environment by using their sensitive organs, especially animals. Okay, especially animals. So by that way, their brain is going to provide, right? Their brain is going to provide certain commands on the muscles and the joints and the skeletons that they have. So by that way, my dear children, we can observe different kinds of movements that occur within the animals, right? That occur within the animals. So once again, what do you mean by a stimuli or else a stimulus? A stimulus or else a stimuli means a certain change that occurs within the environment which can be detectable by the sensory organs. Which can be detected by the sensory organs. This is regarding the animals, okay? In simple, we can say that a change that occurs within the environment, right? That can give out a response by organisms, okay? When you define a stimulus regarding the animals, directly we can say that a stimulus is a change that occurs within the environment that can be captured by the sensitive organs or sensory organs within the animals. It's really simple. So animals capture these things and they give out different kinds of movements when responding to the particular stimuli. Okay. So not only animals but all the other organisms follow the same thing. But however, the stimuli can change from one to another, right? Sometimes for animals, they will respond or they will show different movements for different kinds of stimuli. But however, when you take plants, plants will not be able to provide movements for all of those kinds of stimuli. But however, for particular stimuli, they will be showing movements as well. Okay. So the responding ability is going to change, but however, movements can be observed within the animals and as well as the plants according to different kinds of stimuli that occurs within the environment. Okay. So these movements, my dear children, mainly can be observed because of the stimuli that's going to occur within the environment. Stimuli is a change that is going to occur within the environment, okay, that can give out a response by organisms, right? A change that occurs within the environment that are detectable by organisms so that they would give out a response. So that particular thing or those things are referred as stimuli, right? So the plural form is the stimuli, singular form is the stimulus. So this is what do you mean by the stimuli or else the stimulus, okay? Right, so living organisms change the location of their whole body or part of its body as a response to a stimulus. So living organisms, my dear children, they show different movements. I mean, like they are change in the location of the whole body or else a body part when they are responding to a certain change in the environment or else to a stimulus. Okay. So this process is the one which is known as movement. So the process of change in this location of a body part or else the entire body is referred as the movement. So movements can be observed when responding to a certain stimulus, right? When organisms are going to respond to a certain stimulus or change in the environment, the organisms are going to show different kinds of movements, my dear children. Okay. Then you know very well that movement is a feature of living organisms. Not only the animals, but also plants do movements. So we know that animals are going to show movements. Even when I'm speaking right now, you can see different movements of my hand, sometimes in my facial muscles, sometimes in my mouth. You can see different movements, right? So when I'm going to turn like this, right? When I'm going to turn like this, it's also a movement. When I'm going to go walk like this, that is also a movement. So you know that organisms, especially animals, they show different kinds of movements. The pets that you are in, the pets who are living in your house, like the dogs, right, and cats, any other pet who are living in your houses, they show different movements. They run here and there, right? When you give food to them, they show different movements, right? Sometimes the dogs will wave their tail here and there. Okay, so like that way there are different kinds of movements that can be observed within the animals, right? So I'm not going to mention examples for the animals, my dear children. It's very easy. You know that animals are going to show movements in day-to-day life. It's very simple. But however, I'll be mentioning several examples for the movements in plants. Okay, so I'll give you simple examples because we are discussing about these things when you go further with the lesson part, right? There's a whole heap of a lesson part regarding the movements of a plant. Okay, so therefore I'll mention just simpler examples. So I'll mention 3 examples here. So what are the movements that can be observed within a plant? So like I said, when I was starting the lesson, I said several examples regarding the motion or regarding the movements of a plant. So what are those things, my dear children? The sleeping movement. Sleeping movement. Sleeping movement. Example, mimosa. Right? Mimosa. Then tamarind. Tamarind. Then, my dear children, growth movements. Growth movements. Example, growing apex, growing apex towards light. Right? Growing apex towards light. Then growing roots towards ground or soil. Right? Growing roots towards ground or soil. Growing apex towards light. Then I'll take the slide somewhat up. Another example. So this is number 1. This is number 2. Number 3. Blooming of flowers. Right? Blooming of flowers. So like that way there are different kinds of movements that we can observe within the plants. Right? Here a part of the body or else the entire body is going to move. Entire body movement can be observed within the movements of the animals. When we are discussing about the plants, we'll be observing, or we can observe only about a certain part which is going to move, or a certain part is going to move, that's it, not the whole body. So during the sleeping movement, my dear children, leaves of the tamarind plant and the mimosa plant is going to move. They're going to shrink. Then during the growth movements, the apex and the roots, for the two examples which I have given here, apex and the roots are growing, right? I mean, like they are showing the movement. Then for the blooming of flowers, the flower is the part which is going to show the movement. So all of these things can be considered as movements regarding a plant. Movements regarding a plant. So plants are going to show movements in a particular part, only in a particular part. However, animals, they show movements sometimes in parts and as well as the entire body movements. Okay. So both these things can be observed within the animals. So these are the examples for the movements that we can observe within the plants. Okay, within the plants. So it is obvious to us that not even animals but plants also show different kinds of movements, right? Different kinds of movements. Right then. So now we are going to discuss a small bit of an activity. So here within this activity we'll be studying about movements of animals, right? We'll be studying mainly about the movements of animals. Now it's time to discuss movements related to animals. Okay, movements related to animals. So here it is given, you'll be needing these things: video clips that show the movements of human and other animals, or live specimens of animals such as snail, earthworm, prawn, frog, crow and fish. So you can take several organisms here, several animals here. Okay. However, when you are selecting these animals, my dear children, they should be differ from one particular to another. I mean, like they should be in different species. That's how we are going to observe the movements related to animals. Don't select the same species. Try to go for the varieties. So within this activity, you need to observe the movements of different species of animals. Okay. So when you are selecting animals, remember to select different kinds of ones. Okay. So if you can't find out live ones, then you can find out, or you can collect several video clips. You can use the internet and you can watch these things. Okay. However, what you have to do, you have to find out several video clips or else any other resources in order to find out the locomotions or movements regarding animals. So when selecting animals, try to get more varieties of animals. Okay. So here you are given with several figures. So each of these figures will show the different kinds of organisms. So like I said, when I was starting the lesson, my dear children, I told you that within the motions of the, or within the movements of the animals, we'll be discussing about movements of microorganisms like amoeba, euglena and paramecium. Okay. So it's wise to choose these organisms, microorganisms, when doing this activity. Okay. So here you have to select different kinds of organisms, especially animals. So several animals are given within the figures, my dear children. If you want, you can find out even more animals other than these animals, right? However, what you have to do, so I'll go for the next slide in order to show that the thing which you are going to do in here. So the thing which you are going to do in here is very simple. You list down the animals which you took, then what you have to do, you have to fill down the appendages used by each animal for their locomotion. You know that animals are going to locomote, right? So for their locomotion, what you have to do, you have to write down the things or the appendages used by each of the animal. So you can use any animal you want, no problem within it. However, you should be able to write down the part which is important for the locomotion or for the movement of the particular animal. Okay, remember that. So doing this thing is very simple, or this activity is very simple to do. What do you have to do? You have to find video clips that show the movements of human and other animals or live specimens of animals. Okay, so when you are taking live specimens, right, it's important to not to harm those animals. Okay, don't kill those things, right? Harming means actually you are going to kill when you are going to capture these live animals. So don't do any harm, right? It's not good to harm the animals, no. So it's better to use video clips and all the other things, right? Virtual things, right? Other than the real ones. If you are going to find out real ones, make sure you not to harm these animals or else organisms, right? So here it is given. The method is very simple. Observe the movements of the given animals by using the video clips of the specimens. So it is given here also that make sure not to harm the living animals. So after that, what you have to do, identify the appendages used for the movements. Okay, identify the appendages used for the movements. So within this you are given with several animals, my dear children. So a toad is there, amoeba, euglena and paramecium, the microorganisms. Then there is an earthworm, then cheetah, a snail, leech is there, dolphins and cobra. So other than that, there can be other different animals as well. So here when I'm going to fill the table, right, when I'm going to fill the table, my dear children, I'm going to use somewhat other types of animals as well. Okay, so you can use any animal you want, no problem in it. However, try to identify the appendages used by each animal for their locomotion. Right then, so this is the way of doing the activity, my dear children. It's very simple, a very simpler activity. Okay, a very simple activity. Right. So now, what we are going to do is, now let's observe several video clips of different kinds of animals. Okay, you watch these video clips very well and observe what are the appendages that are going to help for the motion of each and every organism given in the video clip. Okay, right. So let's head on to observe the video clip, my dear children. Then we'll come back once again to write down the appendages. Okay. So my dear children, we observed several video clips, and from that video clips it's obvious to us that most of the animals, they use several appendages, different kinds of appendages, when these organisms or when these animals are going to show movements. So now we are going to complete the table regarding those appendages. Okay, so first thing is given. Let's ignore about these three, about the amoeba, euglena and paramecium. Okay, so we'll be discussing about those things, but up to now let's go for the animals. Okay, let's go for the animals, most common animals. So we'll fill out those things first, then we'll come back to the other guys, the microorganisms. Okay, earthworm. So when you observe the earthworm, when you observe in the movement of earthworm, earthworm do not have, or it haven't any, right? The earthworm, it hasn't any particular or special kinds of appendages. There are no certain types of appendages located within the body that help for the locomotion of earthworm. And the same thing can be observed within the leech and also snail and also within the cobra as well. The motion of cobra, like they are moving zigzag, but however, there are no certain organs or there are no certain appendages that helps for the motion of cobra. Same thing applies for the snail and also for the leech as well, and even for the earthworm. All of these organisms, they haven't got any special appendages for locomotion. But however, my dear children, there are special things which are going to help for their movement, right? For their locomotion. Let's take the earthworm. Muscles contained within the body of the earthworm helps for the locomotion. So you know that the earthworm is moving like this, right? So sometimes they're going to stretch their body by using the muscles, and sometimes they're going to curve their body. So like that way they are showing different movements in order to show the locomotion. But however, for these movements, definitely the muscles contained within the animal is going to help. So we can simply write down the appendages, muscle movement. Muscle movement. So by the movement in the muscles, right? By the movement in the muscles, they show or they try to locomote from one place to another, right? So if you take the leech also the same, my dear children. I told you that they do not have, right, muscle movement. Leech do not have, leech and earthworm, both of these guys, they do not have special kinds of appendages like us. For our locomotion, we have our legs, right? For the locomotion of cheetah, toad, crow, they have different appendages. But however, these two particular organisms, they do not have any special, right, any special appendages. They show movements mainly because of the muscle movements. Okay, mainly because of the muscle movements. Right then, dolphin. So dolphin, when you take dolphin use special kinds of fins. We can name these things as fins, no problem. But however, these things are somewhat special rather than the other fish types. Okay, you know that dolphin is a mammal, right? Dolphin is a mammal, it's not a fish, right? Other fish types are using fins, but however, these special appendages used by the dolphin for their locomotion is referred as flippers. Flippers, okay? Flippers. Flippers. So dolphin use flippers for the locomotion. Flippers. Next one, snail. Like I said, there are no special appendages for the motion of the snail, right, or for the movement of the snail. But however, their muscular foot, right, their muscular foot helps to do the locomotion process, right? No matter the muscular foot, my dear children, or the muscular foot to foot is also made up with, muscles. So mainly they are showing muscle movements in order to locomote. Okay, they are showing muscle movements in order to locomote. So simply we can write muscle movements in muscular foot. Muscle movement in muscular foot. Okay. Next one, cobra. Cobra, like I said, cobra did not have any special kind of appendages for the movement. So, however, they show movement by using the same thing, muscle movements, right? Muscle movements. Next one, the toad. A toad has special limbs for the locomotion, right? So limbs, front and back, limbs are there. Limbs. Next one, crow. Crow has wings, special wings for locomotion. Wings, special wings for locomotion, right? So they are flying. Crow is flying. So for the flying process or for the flying movement, they have wings. Okay, they have wings. Next one, cheetah and human. Both of these both of these animals has, right? They have legs. Okay, they have legs for the locomotion. So we can write legs, right? Legs. They have legs for the locomotion. Now, my dear children, I am coming for these special microorganisms. If you take the microorganism amoeba, amoeba is a unicellular microorganism. Unicellular means it contains only one cell. So, amoeba can create legs-like structures in order to move from one place to another. These leg-like structures, right? These are not actual ones but false ones. Okay, these leg-like structures are false ones. These things are referred as pseudopodia. Pseudopodia, right? Pseudopodia. So, pseudopodia can be observed within the amoeba, pseudopodia, right? These things are also called as false legs or false feet, pseudopodia. Euglena. Euglena is like this. Euglena has a special kind of a thread-like structure, or else a arm-like structure, a finger-like structure like this. This structure is called as flagella. flagella. This is referred as flagella. So euglena can shake or move this flagella like this here and there. Then by using that particular movement within the flagella, the organism is going to locomote from one place to another. So this flagella is the special part that helps for the locomotion of euglena. Okay, flagella. So we can write the answer, flagella. Then the paramecium, my dear children, right? Paramecium. Paramecium is like this. It's like this. Paramecium has hair-like structures around the cell body. Hair-like structures around the cell body. So these hair-like structures are going to wave here and there, and by those wave-like motions contained within the hair-like structures, the paramecium can move from one place to another, or paramecium can locomote. So these hair-like structures contained within the paramecium, my dear children, these hair-like structures contained within the paramecium. These structures are referred as cilia. These structures are referred as cilia. So these are cilia. Cilia. So paramecium use cilia for the locomotion. Okay, cilia for the locomotion. Right, cilia. So here we go then. Cilia. Right. So these are the special appendages that we can observe within the bodies of an organisms. Right, okay. Within the bodies of the organisms, we can observe these kinds of special appendages. Some organisms, they have several appendages, but some organisms, they do not have special appendages. Right? Even we discussed about the locomotion process of the microorganisms. They also have several appendages for the locomotion. So when you take amoeba, amoeba has pseudopodia, which is also referred as false feet or false legs. Euglena, they have a thread-like structure or else an arm-like structure, which is referred as flagella. Paramecium, cilia. Special structure is cilia. Then earthworm, leech, and also snail and cobra. They mainly show muscle movements for the locomotion, right? Snail is having a muscular foot. Cobra is having, within the body of cobra is having, they're having scales. Scales also helpful for the locomotion of the cobra. But however, my dear children, even though they have these things are located within the muscles of the organism. So we can say that muscle movements are the main things which are helpful for the locomotion of leech, cobra, earthworm, and for the snail. Okay, and for the snail. All of these organisms, they show movements by moving a particular muscle. Okay, then we can observe flippers within the dolphin, right? We can observe flippers within the dolphin. We can observe limbs in a toad and wings in a crow and legs within cheetah and human. So these appendages help in the locomotion process of these animals, my dear children, right? in the locomotion process, these special appendages are very helpful. Okay, so by looking at that video clip also, we took this idea. Okay, we took this idea. Right then, so as you can see within the figure, right, within the given table, it's very simple to get an observation. So this observation is different animals use different kinds of appendages for their locomotion, right? So our observation is very simple. Okay then, so let's head on to see what are the other things. So like I said, my dear children, amoeba, this is the shape of amoeba. So like I said, my dear children, amoeba can use, or the cell body of the amoeba is having only one particular cell now. That's why it is called as a unicellular organism. So amoeba has a special ability in order to, when amoeba needs to locomote from one place to another, or when amoeba is going to move from one place to another, amoeba can change the body like this, creating small leg-like structures. Okay, these are legs-like structures, right? You can observe it. So these leg-like structures are referred as pseudopodia, right? Pseudopodia. So these are the structures that we can observe within the motion of, or within the movement, or during a movement of amoeba. These structures can be clearly observed, right? These structures can be clearly observed. So these are live photographs of amoeba, my dear children. When you observe amoeba, you can observe amoeba like this. Okay, you can observe amoeba like this. So these are pseudopodia, which helps for the locomotion of amoeba, right? For the locomotion of amoeba. Then, my dear children, the second one, euglena. Euglena. So euglena is going to use flagella for locomotion. Euglena is going to use flagella for locomotion. So here, like I said, my dear children, so this is the thread-like structure of euglena. This is not a euglena, it's a paramecium. You can observe that thing by using the shape. So ignore about this one. Don't think about this one. I'm just talking about this and this animal. Okay. So when you check this image, it's very simple to observe the flagella. See, flagella, that thread-like structure. It's a thread-like structure within the body of the organism, right? Thread-like structure, euglena. So euglena is going to use a special appendages which are referred as flagella. Within this figure also, you can observe that flagella, my dear children, right? Flagella can be observed in here also. See, this part. This one is the flagella. Then the next one, paramecium uses its hair-like cellular organelles called cilia for locomotion. So this is paramecium. This is actually a drawn figure, a cartoonized figure. So here you can observe, right, within the structure, here you can observe hair-like structures around the body or around the cell body of the paramecium. This is a live photograph. So within the live photograph also, you can observe those hair-like structures, my dear children. Around the cell body, you can observe those hair-like structures. So these hair-like cellular organelles, what do you mean by an organelle? Organelle. Now, I told you that these organisms are unicellular. Means they contain only one particular cell. Within the cell, my dear children, within one particular cell, within just a single cell, if there are several, okay, if there are several special structures within one cell, if there are several special structures, then those structures are referred as organelles. So within the body of this organism, you can observe there are several structures within the body, within the cell body. Okay, so these structures are referred as organelles. These hair-like structures contained within the body is also organelle, right? Is also a type of an organelle. So organelles are the ones which located within the cell of an organism, right? Within the cell of an organism, especially in microorganism, right? So in order to be an organelle, it should be located within a cell, okay? Within a cell, or else within the cell body, on the cell body. It should be one single cell, okay? One single cell. So these are the ones which are referred as organelles. So paramecium uses hair-like cellular organelles which are called as cilia for the locomotion process. So these are the cilia, okay? So flagella, euglena, paramecium, cilia, then the previous one, pseudopodia, amoeba. Pseudopodia or false legs or false feet, amoeba. Right then. Then my dear children, human beings, cheetah and toad use limbs for their locomotion. So these legs can be also referred as limbs, right? No problem in it, right? Limbs or legs, no problem. So these organisms, what organisms? Human, cheetah, toad, they use limbs for the locomotion. So this is only regarding with the table that we have discussed earlier, okay? A further classification for the table which we have discussed earlier. However, when you take the other organisms or other animals, you can observe their limbs like this. So monkey, the limb is like this. This is the limb of a gecko, limb of a squirrel, iguana, turtle, bear, frog, dog. This is the paws of a cat, and these are the limbs of a sloth, right? So several, by looking at this figure, my dear children, you can observe that several types of limbs can be observed for several species of organisms. Different organisms, they have different locomotive structures or appendages, okay? So these locomotive structures, appendages, are referred as limbs. So these are the limbs of different kinds of organisms or different kinds of animals who are living within our environment, okay? So all of these structures or all of these things, all of these locomotive structures are commonly referred as, my dear children, limbs. Limbs. It's okay to say legs also, but however, limbs is the most proper word. Limbs. In here, right, in here, you can observe the limbs of, right, you can observe the limbs of human, right, the limbs of humans. So humans have hands for the movements and also legs for the movements and also for locomotion, right? These limbs are referred as legs and arms, especially, right, in humans, okay? So these are the locomotive structures that we can observe within the animals, my dear children. So when you look at the figures, my dear children, it's obvious to us that in order to locomote quite easily or in order to move from one place to another quite easily, they have different structures within the limbs. A sloth is an animal, like bear-like animal, who is going to climb trees. Mainly they are living within the trees. So they have like sharp claws which helps for the locomotion or in order to climb trees. So squirrel also have sharp nails like this so that they can climb well. Then if you take the gecko has like these kinds of appendages so that they can climb, they can cling on walls. And even for the frog, they have special structures like this. The bear, turtle, right? And also when you look at the other animals, they have different kinds of structures and different types of appendages which are helpful for their locomotion, right? Which are helpful for their locomotion. But not only for the locomotion, my dear children. If you take processes like eating food, right? For these kind of processes as well, sometimes for other processes, these limbs are very helpful for the organisms. Okay, so for the feeding mechanism also, these things are very important, not only for the locomotion, right? Then, so these are the limbs that can be observed within the animals which are helpful for their locomotion. Then, my dear children, the next one, dolphin use flippers for the locomotion, right? Dolphin use flippers for their locomotion. So these are the flippers. As you can see, these are the flippers, right? These are the flippers. Dolphin. So dolphin is going to use flippers for the locomotion. Flippers. Then birds such as crows are using wings for their locomotion. So these are several structures of wings, my dear children, right? Birds use wings for the locomotion, right? Several wings for the locomotion. So wings are the structures used by birds for their locomotion. Flippers are the locomotive structures of dolphin. So by looking at these figures, we identified that several appendages are needed for the locomotion of different kinds of animals. Okay, for the locomotion of different kinds of animals, these structures are very helpful. There are special structures which are helpful. Commonly, these structures are referred as appendages. Commonly, these things are referred as appendages. And there are several locomotive ways or way of locomotions when you observe the animals. Okay, right then. So my dear children, we have discussed about the locomotive structures of different animals now. As you can see, several animals are going to use several kinds of locomotive structures. Usually these things are referred as appendages. Even the microorganisms, they also have different kinds of appendages within their body for their locomotion. Okay, right then. So let's head on to see the other things. So appendages used by animals for movements. So you are given with a point, animals like earthworm, leech, snail and cobra do not have special appendages for their locomotion. So like I said, within the body of animals like cobra, snail, leech and earthworm, within the body of these organisms, we can't observe any special structure. So muscle movements are the ones which are helpful for the locomotion of these organisms. Muscle movements. Then you are given with a special point here. Animals show locomotion and most of them use muscles for their movements. Right? Most of them use muscles for their movements. If you take a caudate means a vertebrate. A vertebrate animal, they have muscles and as well as what? They have skeletal system. They have skeletons, bones. So both bones and muscles helpful for the movement of a caudate or else movement of a vertebrate. Most of the animals, you know that most of the animals who are living within our biosphere are invertebrates. So most of the animals, they use what? They use muscle movements for the locomotion. However, if you take a vertebrate, they use muscles and bones both for their locomotion process, my dear children. Okay. So most of the animals, they show locomotion by using muscles, right? By using muscles. Vertebrates, they show movements by using bones and muscles. Okay, by using bones and muscles. Right, my dear children. So within this chapter, we discuss several things related to the appendages. Right, we discuss several things regarding the locomotive structures or appendages of a particular organism. Right. So these locomotive structures are going to differ from one organism to another. Even with the microorganisms, we discussed that several locomotive structures or appendages can be observed. So by using these locomotive structures, these animals and microorganisms, they are going to show different movements, and sometimes they even show locomotive movements. Actually, most of these things or most of these organisms, almost all the organisms, they show locomotions, right? They show locomotions. So these locomotive structures are very important for the organisms, not for the locomotion, but also for the other things as well. Okay. So we have mainly focused about the locomotive structures and the way of locomotion, way of showing movements within this chapter, my dear children. So finally, we discussed that muscle movements or muscles are the ones which are helpful for the most of the organisms or most of the animals for their locomotion process. So within our next chapter, my dear children, we'll be mainly focusing about bones and muscles. Bones and muscles. Okay, bones and muscles, and also several joints, about the joints. So within our next chapter, we'll be mainly focusing about how does the motion or the movements that occur within humans, right? Especially we are focusing about the elbow joint, and how does the movement of elbow joint is going to work with the help of muscles and the bones, right? So I'm going to wind up this chapter, my dear children. Then within our next chapter, we'll discuss about those things. Okay. So I hope that you will stay with me till the end of the lesson. Then within our next chapter, my dear children, we'll discuss about those joints, bones and muscle in order to discuss the movements of human beings.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.